I'm really excited to be here. We've been working on this extension for quite some time, so I'm really excited to get a chance to show it off. But I'm really excited to get a chance to do a webinar with Phil. I think I was actually a little nervous when I woke up this morning. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing really well. Yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I get a chance to talk about Octopus Deploy, and I get a chance to talk about the GitHub Copilot extension. So it's going to be great. In case you haven't met me, my name is Bob Walker. I'm the field CTO at Octopus Deploy, and I've been with Octopus Deploy since 2018. Prior to joining Octopus Deploy, I was, in fact, a customer of Octopus Deploy, where I helped set it up at a couple of different companies. So I've been in your shoes. I've understood some of your pain points, and now I get a chance to help a bunch of other customers. But Phil, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Phil Holleran. I have the honor of serving as our America's Field CTO here at GitHub. It's a primary technologist role, so I work with a lot of our customers all across the Americas as they look to improve their developer experience in one way or another with GitHub and partner solutions like Octopus Deploy. I've been around GitHub about 9 years now, so I had a chance to kind of see us grow and continue to improve developer experience for individual developers, small teams, and large enterprises alike.
Awesome. So in terms of what you're going to learn today in this particular webinar, we're going to focus in on the GitHub Copilot extensions, specifically around Octopus Deploy. Really, the goal here is to demonstrate how you can bring in system information from different tools, such as Octopus Deploy, directly into your IDE. We're also going to demonstrate how the Copilot extension can help you improve the developer experience. Uh, Typically, this is done with other extensions, but now we have the Copilot extensions that are built into that chat to really help you out. And then at the end, Phil is going to be talking a little bit about some new and upcoming features in GitHub Actions, which I'm really excited to see. I saw the slides come through, and I was like, "Ooh, I kind of want to." Actually, I want to see that instead of my own demo. So,
Excited to have that conversation today.
yeah, absolutely. But before we jump in, let's do a little bit of a primer on developer experience because I think it's one of those nebulous terms for folks that I don't know about you, Phil, but it seems a little bit like DevOps, where everyone kind of has their own little definition of what they think it means.
Yeah, I've kind of come across the same kind of framework, right? But like the overall goal, and you've got a great definition, of it up on the next slide, is really what can we do in terms of the systems, the tech, the process, the culture, teams of everything that influences how software goes from idea to production, and make that as painless as possible for the individual, which has that translate into business value for the company who is building that software.
Yeah, and I pulled this definition directly off of your blog, so I, shamelessly stole that on that. I really also liked, or when if you read farther into the blog where they define it when they say how you can complete tasks with minimal delay by having that low friction experience. Now myself, I look at that like how can I stop all the yak shaving? I don't know about you, Phil, but I have shaved a lot of yaks in my day trying to get
Hmm.
something up to production.
Absolutely, and the number of times that you end up having to solve problem after problem, or really just dealing with kind of the cumbersome process of getting from point A to point B and on to point C,
Yep.
is what we're looking to make a better overall experience for everyone.
Yeah, and we have this. We're going to focus primarily on the CI/CD pipeline, on how we can get a change from the developer's machine up to production. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be a lot of other areas where we're focused in on improving the DevEx experience. Like from an Octopus deploy point of view, we're focused primarily on the deployment side and how we can remove all those different yak shaving spots. But I know GitHub, you've been focused on this as well.
Oh, absolutely. We've been focused on it everywhere from ideation through authoring of code all the way to the point where it gets handed off and to solutions like Octopus to put into production. The thing that I like to think about too, and as we think about developer experience, is it's really about end user experience and customer experience, because the better experience that we as developers and software professionals have delivering that software means that more quickly we're going to be able to get real feedback from users, whether that's in the form of telemetry or actual feedback, so that we can build a better product and get it out there for whomever is consuming that, whether it's paying customers, internal customers, government agencies, whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have up here kind of a list of different steps that someone would have to do to get a change to be promoted up to production. And we were talking a little bit earlier where generally it's not going to be a single person that's going to do all of this. It's a bit of a team sport, but there are a lot of steps. And if you have a bunch of different technologies that you're jumping in between. So for example, when you make your code changes, you commit them to a branch, you're going to be using probably an IDE like Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, JetBrains, whatever the case may be. And then you're going to be building from a branch and you have to switch over to now understanding GitHub Actions and going into the GitHub user interface, which is fine. But then you have to switch again and go over to Octopus Deploy, go back to GitHub for the GitHub pull requests and actions, and go back to Octopus Deploy. So there's a lot of context switching back and forth that occurs. And that can be a bit difficult at times, especially when if you're trying to wrangle a bunch of other people within the organization to get something approved or get something pushed to production or anything like that. Now, generally for folks that are the builders, these are the platform engineers, the lead devs, the senior devs, the people who really are working on improving those processes, adding new features and functionality. They're used to jumping between these different platforms because they have to dive into the nitty-gritty and they have to understand everything. So they're used to going into the GitHub Actions and diving into the logs and seeing what's causing a particular issue with their build. They forgot a script or they mistyped a script or something along those lines. They're used to going into Octopus Deploy and changing the process or anything like that. But there's also the consumers. These are the developers. These are the people that are taking those processes that are put out there, and they're just all they want to do is they just want to run them. They don't want to jump between all those different tools. And with the Copilot extensions, we have the capability now where a developer can now stay inside of their IDE of choice and get something pushed all the way to production without having to jump between all these different tools. We'll still use all the tools, but we just don't have to jump between them.
It really does a good job of removing a lot of the complexity. I mean,
Yeah,
if we kind of think of the DevOps movement over the past decade or so, it's been more and more about individual application teams either owning or being responsible for their code in production and the path to it. And that means, at least, there's tons of comics and web writings out there about all the different things that a developer suddenly has to know deeply and in depth and all the different
yeah.
interface patterns to it. And that's what we're really excited to solve for with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads us to a really good spot. I jumped the gun a little bit, but this leads us to a really good spot where we can talk about the Copilot extensions. So I'll hand it over to you to chit chat about that a little bit.
Yeah, so Copilot, we started announcing Copilot, several years ago, and for the first couple of years, Copilot was primarily focused on that code authoring, helping a developer better express their ideas in code faster and better get information about, third-party frameworks or anything else like that through chat instead of having to go out and search through all sorts of different resources on the internet in order to find the information they need. But as we've kind of talked about to this point, that's a really kind of a small part of the overall path to production for code. So we recognize, hey, at GitHub, there's a lot of other tools in the process that are coming in from partners like Octopus Deploy, or that people might be writing on their own. And there's that kind of pain of integration. You don't want to have to write an AI interface for all of those tools, or you don't want to have 36 different extensions running in your IDE and
Mhm.
knowing which one to chat with. So the goal really of these Copilot extensions is to make sure that Copilot can help you reduce that context switching, reduce the surface that you need to know about and all the kind of unique little intricacies about tons of different extensions, and just provide that information to you directly at your fingertips in plain language in the same interface that you're already using to use Copilot to help with code authoring. And with the extensibility framework that's there, it really allows us to eventually integrate any system with Copilot. And it's available out in beta today. And you all at Octopus Deploy are one of our launch partners on this, who've helped us validate the underlying structure of the architecture of Copilot extensions, being one of the first extensions out there that's available for our joint customers to use. And just as of yesterday, the wait list is wide open. So if what we're talking about today is of interest to you and you're using Octopus or kind of exploring it, you can go right out to that link right there at gh.io/join Copilot extensions and sign up for the waitlist and get in quite a bit quicker now that we're letting folks through the door en masse.
Yeah, I wasn't on the I initially was trying to go through just my personal account, not realizing how closed the beta really was, and so I had to go and beg the appropriate people to get access to it internally. So yeah, but
Well,
it
we're
was great.
glad to reduce the amount of begging that has to
Yeah,
go on now.
yeah,
So as I mentioned, we've got a lot of launch partners and some ready-to-use extensions for folks that are coming on in. From a deployment side, of course, it's Octopus Deploy that we're partnering close with, but you can see a lot of other kind of common tools up there that you might be using across your ecosystem, whether that be something like Docker or Launch Darkly for feature flag management. Of course, GitHub is a wholly owned subsidiary of Microsoft, so we are partners over at Azure, and Teams have got some extensions out there too, and there's going to be more and more coming over the next weeks and months. And of course, if you are interested in writing your own, we've got a partner program that you can join to get access to the API docs and start building your own. And there's the link for it. Hey, how
yeah.
about that? Yeah, so right now it is in beta. So coming soon, as I mentioned, we've got a bunch more partners and extensions coming on board, as well as the ability to author private extensions through the partner program. And then, of course, later on, some general availability, which you'll hear more about us in the future as we get closer to that point. So with that, it probably
Yeah.
makes some sense to show what this experience looks like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to get into the demonstration itself.
Yeah,
Um,
before we get to the demo, I
yeah,
didn't realize I skipped over at one slide. So the
yeah,
first part of this, before we get to the demo and get to the point where Bob's going to be at and take over, you can go and take a look for extensions in the GitHub Marketplace. So just at github.com/marketplace, there's a filter for Copilot, and you can take a look at the Copilot extensions. And the first thing you'd want to do here is add that Octopus for GitHub Copilot extension. It gets installed in your organization or in your repositories as a GitHub app, just like the Octopus app or any other app. And
yeah,
then once it's there, you'll be able to start using it to interact with Octopus Deploy directly from your IDE.
yeah. Once I got the appropriate access, it was really easy. Just clicked a couple buttons and bam, I already had it, and I just pulled up Visual Studio Code and I was good to go. So very easy to get going with it once you get access appropriately. But in terms of the tooling that we're going to use today, we're going to be using Copilot. Obviously, we're going to be using the Copilot extensions. You'll see that I will be using VS Code Insiders instead of Visual Studio Code. This is primarily because we've been working on this and I'm used to using VS Code Insiders because I believe originally the extension only worked for VS Code Insiders, but now I believe, Phil, like you were saying, that it works for both now.
Yep, it works in stable.
Yeah. And so this is a case of I don't want to change anything before the start of a webinar. So that's why you're going to still see me in the insiders. In terms of what we're going to be deploying, we're going to be using GitHub Actions as our build server, Octopus Deploy, obviously, for our deployment server, and we're going to be pushing some changes out to Azure SQL and AKS. Pretty bog standard deployment pipeline. We're going to check in a change to our feature branch, automatically push it up to dev, and then we're going to do a pull request, go to main, then go to test, staging, and production. So that is the gist of what we're going to be doing in terms of the demonstration. But one thing before I jump into Visual Studio Code, I do want to point out a couple of different things. Uh, Commonly, I imagine that most developers or anyone that has to check in changes, they're probably going to have a tool such as Octopus Deploy open, as well as, say, GitHub when they have this open as well. They probably will. This is probably where they're going to do the pull requests. They're going to run their actions or view the actions or anything along those lines. And then they're going to hand it off and go over to Octopus Deploy. In our particular case, we're going to be using the Trident AI app, which you can see up here. And we can jump in and we can see that I have the channel set up to pretty much match what we were talking about in that slide. So I just want to kind of give you an understanding of where we're going to be. But one of the things I think, Phil, that you mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, was you have to understand and know these interfaces in order to properly use them, and that can be bit of a challenge when you have to context switch. You have to go, okay, now I'm going from the GitHub interface, and this is how it's organized. But now I'm going to go to the Octopus interface, and now this is how it's organized. Whereas when I'm using the Copilot extension, I really don't have to context switch like that.
Exactly. And just as a bit of bookkeeping, Bob, could I get you to do like a Command Plus or something on your browser there?
Yeah.
I just got a new prescription a while ago, and I'm having to squint there
Oh
just a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit to
yeah,
read
yeah, yeah.
everything.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
That's
you're all good. Yeah.
let's get that.
Perfect. There we
Yeah,
go.
my mistake. You know what's funny is I think this will probably be the last time we're going to get into the browser.
That's okay. That's the goal of this, right? Is to
Yeah,
avoid the browser as much as possible.
yeah. No, absolutely. And so let's jump into Visual Studio Code. You can see I already have some stuff going, but let's take a quick look at the extension before we start making any sort of changes. And so again, our goal today is I don't want to leave Visual Studio Code. We're going to check in a change, and we're going to push this change all the way up to production. But again, before we do that, let's just take a look at what this extension can do. So I was showing you the Octopus Deploy UI just a couple seconds ago, but we can get it to do something very similar. Show me the dashboard. And then this is going to reach out to the Octopus Deploy instance, the same one. It's using my API key. And so whatever permissions I have configured, those are the permissions that's the extension is going to use as well. You'll see we have the exact same list of environments, but you'll also notice we have this additional environment. So we have the capability to read the Octopus Deploy project and determine what GitHub repo to attach to. So then we can also show you a link back to the GitHub repo, as well as the most recent action that ran for it, any open pull requests, as well as any open issues. This to me was really cool because we can marry these two disparate systems in a response and show it to the users. Now I'm going to jump quickly into the project dashboard to show you that it looks pretty much the same like what we just saw as well. Show me the.
And while that's loading, really what we're seeing here again is just the power of plain human language.
Yep.
Just have to mention the Octopus app and then ask it for what we want. It doesn't require me to know the exact flag and the exact little bit of syntax that I might need to in a typical CLI app or something else like that. We're able to let people interact in a natural conversational way with the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even mistyped that command. It wasn't exactly what I should have typed in, and the Copilot extension understood my meaning, which I thought was really cool. So just like you said with an API, it doesn't have to be exactly precise. It can understand the difference in some of this context, which I think is outstanding on that. I also love the fact that we can, again, show you additional information that we may not be able to show you through the, say, the Octopus Deploy UI. So we show the action, but these test results that you can see right here, this was created as part of my GitHub action run where I ran some unit tests and I uploaded the test results as an artifact, and we're able to pull that in and show that for that particular release, which that to me, when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, I only have to go to one spot to pull in this information now. Now, one of the things that might be a little annoying is having to constantly type in, show me the project dashboard for Trident AI, which is the name of the application. What we can do is we can come in and we can also set defaults. So we'll set the default. And this will help shortcut some of the commands. So we can set defaults for various different items depending on what you're particularly focused in on. All right, so now we kind of have a bit of an understanding of what the Copilot extension can do. I think it's time to make a code change. Now, Phil, I'm a lazy person and I did not write any unit tests for this particular function. I know I'm a bad person. So I'm going to use Copilot to do this for me. And this, I imagine, is probably the standard use case you see for a lot of different users of Copilot. Not
Oh,
generating tests, but doing this.
I was going to say, generating tests is probably one of the standard use cases. I've only met a few developers who love writing tests.
Yeah.
I tend to be a test required developer as opposed to a test driven developer. And the fact that I can let Copilot take care of that for me is is huge. And for a lot of our customers who have got test coverage in the, low single digits to like
Yeah.
60, 70% range, being able to quickly increase that test coverage so that they can increase the confidence in automated testing to ultimately increase release cadence is huge.
Exactly. And what I love about this is that it understood that I was using NUnit for this as opposed to say XUnit or anything like that. And it generated the test appropriately for me. It didn't try to force anything on that. And I actually told it, I would say a couple hours ago, because it was doing XUnit. I was like, no, I want NUnit. And it did it for me. It's like, okay, that's not a big deal. So I'm going to go into the test itself. And I do have tests. I'm not any human monster, but I didn't have tests for that particular function on something like that. So it generated the test for us and can call it good. So I'm going to go ahead and let's create a branch and we'll go ahead and check this in. Feature, I'm just going to do webinar.
Oh, look at
And
that great branch naming syntax. I like it.
yeah, you're going to like my add unit test for webinar. You're going to like my check-in command, check-in comments even better. If you ever
No,
look at,
I
yeah.
legitimately like that. I mean, a lot of people don't use well-structured branch names, and you're kind of wondering, looking at a list of 300 active branches, going, "What's going on here?"
Yeah, well, actually, believe it or not, that's what my GitHub action looks for, is it will build anything that it sees if we have, let me scroll up just a second. If it detects anything in main or if it detects anything with feature as the start of the branch name, it will automatically build it. And then it makes the determination, oh, if you're doing a feature branch, or I can add whatever branch syntax I want on it. And then that tells Octopus Deploy, oh, I only want you to deploy this to development because it's not going to go anywhere up to production. But if I'm checking into main, then I'm going to go all the way to production. So that
I
was
like it.
more for me being a little bit structured on something like that.
Deliberately designed is a good thing.
Yes, yes. Now, I do want to point out that other, Visual Studio Code extensions are still incredibly powerful. I do want to compare and contrast the Visual Studio extension versus the Copilot extension. And one of the things I think that's really important to note is that when you think about a standard Visual Studio Code extension or just any extension out there, is that you're really kind of limited by what the authors made the determined that you need to see. So for example, it's making the determination of this is how I'm going to present this information to you. And it's going to show you the different workflows and to show you the different settings, but that's really, you're kind of at the limit for something like that. Now, that's not bad. I actually like this extension a lot because it does what it says on the tin, but at the same time, we don't get access to other information. I have to jump over to the GitHub user interface to see something like that. And that to me is one of the big powers of the Copilot extension, is we can see different information, and we'll be able to see that when it starts kicking off. It should be done pretty soon. Every once in a while, that build and push container takes a couple seconds, but that again, that to me is one of the big powers of the Copilot extension, is being able to see that and be able to query additional information. And I want to show you that in just a couple seconds.
Yeah, and when this is done too, we will see that, but we can also start, passing the context of one, system off to another. We're pretty focused on just getting this change to production, which is
Yep.
no small feat in and of itself. But you can simply extend this to a world where we're investigating a database performance issue, and so we can start asking the Copilot extension that's looking at our database to, bring back performance information, then ask Copilot to suggest an optimization to the query, then ask Octopus Deploy to help us deploy it up into dev and test and start validating those assumptions all in the same conversation thread.
Yeah, that to me is really powerful, being able to see that. And so we can see right now we have something getting pushed up to development. We've made the determination as the authors that blue means it is in progress. And so again, we're not limited to just this type of information. I can do, oh, give me a summary. Now, every once in a while, this has happened. I think this is part of the beta where it just goes, you know what, we need to start again. So, not the end of the world if that does
Yep.
happen. I just restart the chat and keeps the context as is, and everything continues to work.
This is where you get to see live demo slash live beta going on. Just
Exactly.
you're not
Yeah, it happens. But what we can see here is we can see all of the steps that have successfully ran, and we can see the step that is currently in flight at this particular point in time. Now, again, going back to, I'm just thinking back to DevEx, being able to change and surface this kind of information is really powerful to me. And are you seeing something similar when you're talking to other, I say, extension authors as well as other users of Copilot?
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing is the power on the developer side, but also the power on the extension author side to be able to offer another front door into their system, right?
Yep.
So for a while there was a huge pattern that we were big proponents of called chat ops, and we still make heavy use of chat
Hmm.
ops at GitHub, and a lot of our customers do that for democratic deploys so that everybody can kind of see what's going on. Of course, chat ops still require you to know the exact chat command that you want. Here, we're kind of creating that opportunity for anyone to use Copilot as that front door into their system.
Yep.
And whether you've got an LLM running in the back, whether you're just calling REST APIs, whether you're returning flat text or doing whatever you want, Copilot becomes that front door as a way for you to quickly and easily extend whatever you're building into that chat-based user interface experience, and reach developers right where they are. And that's where we're seeing, you know, just that opportunity to provide yet another way to interact.
I like that you said it's another front door into the, whatever tool that you're using. In our particular case, Octopus Deploy. I changed around a few commands while you're chatting, and we have give me a summary of the latest deployment, and this lists out all of the steps that it was going to run. And then I changed the command to be summarize the latest deployment, and it changed the information that we're showing. Again, back to that chat ops, we get this flexibility where we don't have to have these exactly pre-described commands like, hey, this is you have to type it exactly this. We can change it up, and we can change the information that's displayed to you. And we could see that this was a successful deployment. So that's great. And we can also see any sort of release notes or anything like that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to merge directly into main. Let's just assume that everything was successful and we had
Uh,
happy days for that.
Standard disclaimer: we're professionals. Don't try this at home. Get a
Yes,
peer review. Demo
absolutely.
magic, cooking show stuff going on here.
Well, I'm the admin on my instance and on my and on this particular GitHub repo, so I'm 100% corrupt when it comes to this type of stuff. So again, we're not leaving. What I like about this is we're still not leaving the VS Code experience at all. Now we are using a different extension, the pull request, which I actually really like. I love how you can just see the differences. We can merge the commit right here, create the merge commit right here, do everything along those lines, which again, very, very powerful. But at the same time, you are still limited by what the authors have determined that you should see for this type of information. Now, I'm not going to force everyone to sit there and wait for the watch the GitHub action and the deployment run again. I do want to talk a little bit about more around what we offer for the Copilot extension. You might be wondering, how do I know the commands that are available? What are some of the options that are available? And we can just type in hi, and the extension is going to come back and it's going to generate and it's going to show us all the possible, like a number of different possible commands that are available to us, as well as how to get it to do certain things like run a runbook, deploy something, set the defaults, how to log out, anything along those lines. And again, this is up to the extension authors to add something like this for in terms of discoverability. I'm kind of curious, have you seen anything similar, or is this kind of what other extension authors are doing, is to promote this discoverability in the extension itself?
Yeah, that's largely what we're seeing other folks do. We do have some guidance in that in the
Fair
Copilot
enough.
Partner Program around kind of like standards. Well, or kind of guidelines around it. But just in the same way that you'd have a man page, for any sort of a terminal command.
Yep.
Similarly, you'd want to provide an easy way for me to understand, hey, what can I do with this thing? And so it'll list it out. And the nice thing again is you don't have to have those commands memorized directly, or you don't have to go through the manual page over and over again. But it's good to know what's possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the commands that I discovered while doing this was this to me really tells the power of what the Copilot extension can do and Copilot in general is I'm asking it a question, what do the deployment steps in this project do? And so this is going to go out to Octopus Deploy. It's going to read the deployment process and it's going to summarize every one of the steps. It's going to use the description that I provide inside of these steps, but it's also going to tell me a little bit about what the script it's running and what it's actually doing. Um, and I think that to me is really powerful because you may or may not know, and you don't really know where to go ask because it may not be very apparent just by looking at, say, the individual steps. But having a nice human readable summary is incredibly powerful. Another one of the commands is I thought one of the other ones which was really cool was the asking it to do something else, which is summarize the non-successful deployments for the Trident AI project. And if the deployments are successful, say so. This is one of those interesting commands that sometimes it will just say, hey, everything was successful. I ran this in a live demo the other day, and it actually generated the markdown table, but it showed everything was successful. So I've discovered sometimes with large language models, you might get a different result each time, but generally it's going to do exactly what you want it to do, but how it displays it might be slightly different.
And that's where you can try re-asking again too. Like
Yeah,
these are not 100% deterministic. They're
yeah.
close. But like if you wanted to ask it to summarize in a table or something like that, that's where you can kind of get a little bit more explicit about what you're asking for.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a look at. Let's see let's say a summary of the latest deployment to test. Let's see where we're at with our deployment that we checked in as part of our pull request while we were talking. All right, so it's almost completed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy the release number, and we're going to go ahead and promote this up to staging. I just want to make sure that it is good to go before I tell it to promote, or the instance will not be happy with me. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and say promote release. And this also will highlight a different piece of functionality. So far, we've been asking the extension questions. Now we're telling the extension, I need you to do something in the Octopus Deploy instance. And and it's giving me an option to back out because I might not have typed in the right version number. I might have forgot to set the default project. I might have mistyped the environment or anything like that. So this gives us a final chance to go, yes, this is exactly what we want to do. I'm going to go ahead and click on accept in that particular case. I thought that was really cool. Wasn't expecting that the very first time when I typed that in. I thought I was just going to do something like this, where it's just going to say, okay, boss, you asked me to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now, is that similar to other extensions that you're seeing as well, Phil, where they're kind of giving you these prompts to kind of confirm or reject anything that you're trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if there's ambiguity in there,
Yeah,
right? Like if the builder of the extension is not entirely or 100% confident about what you're doing, it's just a good practice to validate. Like, hey, is this what you're actually asking for before returning that information? Especially if there's two or three things on your back end as an extension developer that it could be, and you're trying to infer. It
yeah,
also just kind of helps it be a little bit more conversational in nature. We tout Copilot as there's a reason we called it Copilot. It's designed to be, something that works with you and not doesn't just go off and do everything on its own. And so it's just kind of uh, building in that overall kind of ethos to the interaction.
yeah. And it's still, I like the term Copilot because when you think about planes, the pilot is still flying the plane. They're still sitting there. They're still making sure that everything's working as you expect it to work. And if something isn't going right, okay, I'm going to take over on something like this. It feels very similar in that sense. Like, okay, it's doing what I'm telling it to do, and everything's working great. But again, I like these different confirmations. Are you okay? You sure? Yes. Let's go ahead and accept it. All right. Let's see where we're at for the staging deployment, because the staging deployment has something in there that we haven't experienced so far in our deployments to dev and test, which is a manual intervention. And this was an interesting one for us because we didn't originally have this functionality, but thankfully our developers who are working on this extension, they were nice enough to add this in here for this webinar. I asked them, I was like, could we do this? Because this is literally the last thing that I need to do before I can say we truly don't have to leave VS Code. And so let's see if everything works out perfectly. I have high hopes. I mistyped something. I meant to do Trident AI, not Trident. Let's try it again. So now you can see what happens when you mistype something. It'll give you a prompt and say, there's nothing for me to find. Now you might have noticed that I had to type in the environment as well as the project. You can see where I messed that up, as well as the default space. And I had to do all of that particular work. This is something that's interesting as we're developing these extensions and adding these different commands. I've noticed, Phil, that sometimes we have to, I would say, lack of a better term, train the large language model on these different commands so it can understand some of the syntax, and just then I can start using my shortcuts again in that particular case. This was literally just added.
Yeah, it's less a train. It's more just what gets preserved in the conversation session. So when you're
Fair enough.
running when you're running a chat session over there on the left hand side, the session in terms of like all of the interactions and the stuff that's been passed back and forth is preserved in the IDE. And I want to be explicitly clear that it's the in IDE kind of conversation
Yep.
history. It was not anything we're storing on our side. And then some of that conversation history is getting passed along as context to GitHub Copilot, together with your code and your commands and everything else. So that's how we're able to get better responses from Copilot, by asking successive questions in the same conversation thread. But kind of like, say, no, I meant this, and then I meant this, and then it builds on that based upon that conversation session.
Yeah, and yeah, that was kind of understanding that and wrapping your head around that. I think that's going to be a challenge probably for more of the Copilot extension authors, less on the extension uh, users. But
Mhm.
it's nice, like our extension is nice enough to tell us that I couldn't find that project, or you need to specify an environment, or you need to specify a space because you didn't provide one. Like, oh, okay, well, I'll just have to type that out. It's not the end of the world. Again, if this is just as we add new functionality, I think we're probably gonna see something like that. So give me a summary of the latest deployment to staging. So hopefully everything is working as we expect, and we're almost ready to go to production, and we are. Awesome. So now I can just say, let's make sure I get the right release number again. I'm always paranoid I'm gonna mistype the wrong one. Now it's gonna say promote release to production. And again, I want to stress this enough is that we're using the API key of my particular user in this context. And my particular user has permissions to deploy to production. If a developer, when they log in using their API key, if they don't have permissions to do these actions like deploy to production or to approve releases or anything like that, they won't be able to do that. There's not like some sort of, I know this, I heard that, it was like, oh, this is a security hole. Like, no, it's not. You're using the context of the user that's performing the particular action. It's not a special secret sauce type of thing or anything like that. It's just me that's doing it.
And also importantly, it's not a service account behind it.
Yeah.
It is you.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess, and you said it earlier, which is this is another front door, another user interface into Octopus Deploy. Um, so we have to conform to all the same rules. Awesome. And I know we wanted to leave some time for questions. So if there's any questions that have been coming in, I think we're open to taking them. If not, we have one other bit of the demo, but I do want to leave some time open for questions.
There were a couple of I've been handling a few questions coming on
Okay.
in, but it looks like there's actually a question that's been popped up by John in the background here. So Greg is asking if we can use the extension to explain what Octopus is doing or how to make improvements to the process that Octopus is going through.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So that's more on the builder side of this particular process and less really on the consumer side. And right now, in terms of our developers' focus in terms of the use cases, we're really focused in on the consumer side. How do we consume these processes? So I suspect sometime in the future, probably have that capability, but not as of right now.
There's another question I'll just read off here.
Yep.
Ravi had asked, is there any way to use the extension to take a look at build failure or Octopus failure logs?
Yo, that's a good question. I haven't forced a failure to occur. Um, I've been super focused in on the happy path to see something like that. We can see. I imagine we can ask it. I'll show me the. I bet we can just say, show me the detailed logs for the latest deployment to production. We'll see what it does. This is one of those cases where you have to dial in your commands as you're doing a demo for a webinar. I don't know about you, Phil, but when I wanted to make sure I had all the commands, so I was really just hyper focused on getting all the commands in correctly.
And you know what? This is also some great R&D to feed back into our teams based upon
That's
the
a good,
questions you are all asking here.
yeah, this is good stuff. So I'll be curious to see what it generates. Someone asked me the other day when I was doing a live demo, was like, can I see a list of all of my variables? And I was like, probably. And so I said, show me a list of all the variables in this project. And it goes, all right, here's a list of all the variables. It didn't give me the variable values, which I was a little disappointed with, but it gave me a list of all the variable names. It's like,
I
hey,
don't
that's
know.
half the battle.
I'm okay with it not giving the variable values if we need to
Yeah.
keep those secret from people.
Well, for the secret ones, we won't be able to return that. But for the non-secret ones, it would, we can show that. But I just thought that was nice. It's like, oh, that's a pretty nice little thing. Oh, so we can see what the what it will look like if I do something like that. Show me the detail. How about just show me the logs? My concern is that it's too long in terms of response because those logs can get pretty lengthy.
Well, the good news is we're generating a bunch of 500 errors that someone is going to go investigate and figure
Exactly.
out why did they happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That
So
unexpected EOF, I bet that was probably a failure.
thanks, John. So maybe while this is summarizing, we can kind of come back to it because I know you had one or two other things that you wanted to highlight here as we kind of went through as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll show one other thing that we can do. Well, while we're waiting for this to happen, I do want to jump back into the slide deck and we can talk about a few things here. So there are some known limitations. The Copilot extension currently is in beta. I don't know why I keep capitalizing P. I'm sure other people have picked up on that, and sometimes a
It's all
lowercase.
good.
They are currently in beta, so keep that in mind. Once you start signing in and signing up for the open beta, it's not 100% perfect for everything along those lines. If there is certain missing functionality, that's the responsibility of the technology partners, the people that are working on the extensions themselves. So, for example, one of the things I really want to have added to the extension is the ability to cancel a deployment or a runbook run. That's currently isn't possible. I have to go into the Octopus Deploy UI. Same thing with prompted variables or the deployment object status or anything like that. That's the responsibility of us. That's not the responsibility of GitHub. I don't think that's fair to them. And then also the target use cases are the responsibility of the partners. So as I said, we're focusing primarily on the consumers, not really the builders at this particular point in time. But obviously, as if we expand this out and we start looking at other options, might move into the builder area. But the big reason why we did this is because we know that most people, they will run the deployments, then they will update processes, variables, or add targets. In terms of some commands that in case you're curious to remember, setting the default space when you start up a new session, as well as setting the default project will save you a lot of typing. But then some of the other important commands that I showed, show me a summary of the latest deployment, show me the project dashboard. I didn't show the run book, but If we do want to see that, if there's some time for that, we can definitely do that. Deploy release, summarize the last deployment to a particular environment, approve, release for manual interventions on anything along those lines. All right, I'll hand it over to Phil and we can talk about some of the DevEx improvements.
Yeah. So everything underneath that you were seeing in terms of those, build and test before we pass it off to Octopus to handle the deployment orchestration was all happening on GitHub Actions. And there's a lot of things happening over in GitHub Actions to make the build and test process a little bit less painful. One of the things that we're really excited about is offering a lot more hosted runner hardware choices. So we now have a public beta of hosted ARM64 architecture runners. So if you are building for ARM, we now can do that for you directly in GitHub Actions. Or if you just want to save some money and save some power cycles and have builds run faster, those ARM chipsets are quite fast. We've got a large enterprise software customer of ours that I can't mention by name right now saw their builds go from over 3 hours down to 20 some minutes by switching over to those ARM architecture
Wow.
processors. So pretty cool there, whether you're developing for embedded or just want to go faster, or you need to compile across environments. We've also got some GPU accelerated things out there if you're doing ML or ML ops and you need to inference or retrain. But beyond that too, one of the things that is can slow a lot of demos down or is having to install dependencies and install them, especially if you're taking a vanilla runner image off the shelf, having to pre-install those. That can take seconds to minutes worth of time that you probably don't want to pay us to do every single time a job runs, and we'd rather have you not pay us for that either. So we do have a custom runner images capability that's coming very soon to beta. If you're interested, you can just reach directly out to me, or if you have an existing account relationship with GitHub, reach out to them and let them know. But it's basically a YAML workflow. Grab this vanilla image, so like grab this Ubuntu image, install all this stuff on it, snapshot it, make it ready for me so that I can start with everything pre-installed, ready to go on these hardware choices. Just again, to make sure that those builds are going as fast as possible so that we can help you get to production as quick as possible.
What I like about that is we have something similar with Octopus, but what I've really liked about that is you can also control the exact versions of your different dependencies as well, as opposed to trying to have like one thing rule them all with every single possible dependency.
Exactly. And then the other nice thing about that too is what's on there by code. If you've
Yeah,
got a YAML workflow file, you know what was on that image at that particular time. You can go back and point to that from an audit perspective. And then I more and more customers seem to want to do less and less with maintaining machines, right?
fair
We
enough.
moved from the data center to VMs, and we're still babysitting the VMs and reimaging them and upgrading them. And then we went from kind of VMs in the data center to VMs in a public cloud, where we're still kind of doing that, but at least we don't own the hardware. Now we're seeing more and more demand for just run this for me and give it back. And we want to make that as painless a process as possible for those who want to do it.
In terms of some other resources, we talked a little bit about the DevEx blog that GitHub wrote. So I have that link up there, as well as the behind the scenes of how we wrote the Copilot extension. One of the original authors, Matt Casperson, he wrote a very extensive blog post detailing this out. I was rereading it today. I'm like, wow, this is pretty extensive. Talking about how he tested it, about the challenges of working with a large language model over a very standard. These are the exact commands, those types of things. And then also a link to our docs if you're interested and you want to start using the Copilot extension and how to set it up, how some of the commands, how to use it, everything along those lines. So that's it. I do want to go back to the. We still got another error. So my guess is that that was a question that we weren't anticipating, and so we got that. That happens. But we'll leave it open for any questions.
Did you hear that? I think that's the sound of a new ticket landing on somebody's
I think so. Yeah.
Jira board.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as this webinar is done, there shall be a ticket submitted.
So there is a question. Chad is asking about availability on GitHub Enterprise Server. None of the stuff's actually running on enterprise server. So, I mean, the Copilot extensions are extensions that get installed into Copilot and need to be managed out in the SaaS deployment of GitHub. Now, if you're running Octopus and Octopus is grabbing information off of a self-hosted Git server somewhere, you can still interact with Octopus through chat, but the communication paths for Copilot are dependent upon some level of usage of code out in, or some level of usage of GitHub Enterprise Cloud for really anything that has to do with AI.
Yeah, we have something similar with the extension itself, where every cloud user, automatic access, very easy, no worries whatsoever. For any of our self-hosted customers, it is possible, and our documentation will detail out the steps you'll need to take to make it available to the extension for it to work appropriately.
Yeah.
So,
And one thing that we didn't really call out in this is that the extensions here that we're bringing into Copilot are available across the surface of Copilot wherever you can chat with Copilot.
mhm.
And you'll only be able to chat with Copilot in GitHub on the hosted version of GitHub. There's no path to these AI capabilities being natively built into the like GitHub.com experience in the self-hosted product. But we could go and we could open up GitHub.com and start asking these same questions to Octopus Deploy that we're asking in VS Code. We could ask them over in VS Enterprise, in JetBrains. It's ubiquitous across all of those surfaces.
Yep, yeah, and 'cause I was curious about that, but then I think I can't remember if you and I were chatting earlier, if I just saw some some other thing come through where they said, "No, it's available in all these other different things." So, yeah, I think that's really cool. You're not limited to just Visual Studio Code on that. I saw a question come through from Greg Gantz. Does it alert on failures, or would it display the details if you asked? This was, there's something similar I asked, which was, could we just keep the chat open and just have it constantly refresh the screen, where it just shows me, my deployment as it's progressing on something like that. I think that's more of a limit. It's not really. Sorry, let me back up. I don't believe that's really the intended functionality of Copilot, is to have this constant stream of data constantly sending you this information. It's, you ask a question, it gives you a response.
That's correct. Yeah, it's not going to leave a long poll open just to constantly receive information in. There are other ways to alert folks to that, but the kind of the standard communication path back and forth to Copilot or really any of these models is you submit a prompt and then the prompt returns a stream of information. But when we hit the end of the response, we kind of close the stream, we close that, and then it gets bound out, and then we need to have another prompt-based interaction to go back and check on it.
Yeah. So generally, what I recommend is using your communication tool of choice, be it email, Teams, Slack, whatever the case may be. Have the process send out the alerts once it's, if there's an error, or once it's done doing the thing. That way, you kind of get that near real time. This is really designed for, I want to ask it questions and interact with it.
And as you saw, while we were waiting for those 500 errors to happen and for things to time out on the back end, it kind of locks up your ability to do anything else with it. And so if your deploy takes 20, 30, 40 minutes or more, suddenly we're talking about just leaving that single chat thread open for 20, 30, 40 minutes, waiting to see if something comes through, which kind of diminishes the utility of the ability to go off and ask all those other questions.
Yeah, and it's not, back to that point, it's not just, you're not just locking out being able to do anything with Octopus. You're talking about locking out just the Copilot chat in general, right?
Well, I mean, we're waiting on that thread, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I'm a huge fan of alerting people in Slack or Teams or wherever else when those fail. We've got internal patterns here where that depending upon the type of issue, it'll automatically open up an issue in GitHub and drop in all the relevant information. And then if since Copilot is available in chat in GitHub.com, you can always just start chatting with it again and then chat with Octopus in the issue that it opens.
yeah.
Like, hey, what happened with this deployment? Now it's got the context of exactly the app. It's got the context of what failed. We can start having that conversation again with Octopus and with GitHub at the point of failure once it's dumped all that information out to a place for us to consume it.
That's fair. When will the not really the app, but when will I'm gonna guess the extensions, when will they be out of beta?
Uh,
Don't know. Yeah, I know I have
Honestly,
guesses, but I have no clue.
the answer to that is when they're stable and when they're ready.
Yeah.
So the way that we typically approach this type of stuff is, so with some things we'll have a fairly closed alpha where we're validating, is this the right thing? Is this the right problem to solve? Are we solving this in the right way? We did that with Octopus and a few other people where we got to go around and regularly break our API and change things based upon feedback. Then we get into betas where we start getting these in front of customers and where we're encouraging you all to go and sign up for that right now. That's where we start, we've kind of gotten the design pretty much aligned. And now we're looking at, okay, are there corner cases that we missed? What is the level of load that we're going to expect for capacity planning and ramp that up? Once all that happens and we get good information out of the beta, then we can go to GA. All that's to say, we're getting much closer in the process, but I don't have a targeted date or anything like that to share with you at this time.
That's fair, and it's also, I suspect also, um, the some of it's also due to I would say to the extension. It's not due to, but some of the lack, I wouldn't say lack of, but maybe some of the missing functionality or functionality that hasn't been added yet. I mean, that's still on the extension authors like ourselves. Like there's clearly spots where I want more functionality. I
Yeah,
imagine other users want more functionality as well. And so it might be like, well, why is this out of beta? It's like, well, the extensions are out of beta, not that extension.
exactly. You'll see the general framework go from beta GA from GitHub, and then probably after that point, you'll start seeing ecosystem providers start switching theirs over from beta to GA, and we'll have new folks in the ecosystem start releasing
Yep.
their Copilot extensions in beta as they validate what their users are looking for out of the extension, just like apps or anything else are at this point.
Yeah. So it's that I picked that question on purpose because it is a bit of a loaded question because there's so many different stages as to when something is quote unquote completely out of beta.
Exactly. Although we're not going to go the 6 years in beta route of a certain email provider. That is certainly not the intent. It's to get
Yeah,
there as soon as prudent.
makes sense.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions listed in the chat. So, Bob, Phil, thank you very much. Just to wrap things up, I'm going to provide some resources here for folks. This is not the end of your webinar learning journey. We have many other webinars available at /webinars that you can check out. As I'm reminded constantly, there's always webinars to do. This is our blog. If you haven't seen it before, this is at /blog. And Matt Kasperson's blog post about how and why he built the extension is listed here. We have some other resources worth noting. One resource is, of course, our docs, which Bob mentioned, now featuring with dark mode. Awesome. We have an integrations page at /integrations, and we do highlight GitHub there. So if you want to find out how does Octopus talk and play well with others, this is a great page to check out, /integrations. And then finally, some resources from GitHub. Obviously, there's the Copilot sign-up page, which you can check out right now. There's the marketplace as well. You'll find not only the apps and actions that are listed there, you'll find them from Octopus as well. You'll also find the integration points with Copilot if you just hit the Copilot extension filter there. There's our extension if you want to check that out. I am a big fan of the blog. So if you check out the blog at github.blog, this is constantly updated. Lots of great resources worth checking out. They write about everything that's going on behind the scenes, which is awesome. And then finally, and probably very importantly, we're going to be at GitHub Universe along with
Yep.
GitHub, of course, because they're hosting it. So October 29th and 30th, we'll be there. We're one of the sponsors. We would love to see you there. It's in San Francisco. And if you want to check out GitHub Universe, GitHub Copilot, Octopus Deploy, all that sort of stuff, we'll be there alongside others as well. So feel free to check that out.
I'm excited to attend my 10th universe. We've got a big venue this year. It's a new venue that's going to allow us to have more talks, more opportunities to learn things and from one another. It's going to be pretty exciting. So if you can make it on out there just before Halloween, please be sure to come and chat us all up while we're out there.
It's going to be my first universe, so I'm excited to be there. So swing by our booth and say hi. If you want a demo, I'm happy to show you the Copilot extension or anything else.
Awesome. Well, Bob, Phil, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. Happy deployments, everyone. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.